Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you for this week's edition of Conversations with American Democracy. We have many things to speak about, but we have an opportunity here to learn a little bit more about establishing a PAC. To refresh everyone's memory, we want to see the right candidates run in our community. There are people who are reluctant to run for office because they say, I can't raise all that money. And so perhaps we can raise that money for them in a PAC and then take the money from our PAC and use it to help their campaign. Given the news, we can fund this. We can fund this PAC by planting gardens. No, I'm sorry, by granting pardons. That's a way that we fund things these days. So here I invited to talk actually to Joe, who has graciously volunteered to be the treasurer of our PAC, suggested we need to talk to an attorney. And so when talking to an attorney on issues related to our side of the political spectrum, the only one and only person who comes to mind is former sheriff of our county, Jim Manfrey, who, as you heard, comes from Long Island and now runs a highly successful attorney, is a highly successful attorney, and is now going to take a phone call or shut it off. By the way, you may want to shut off your phones, not that I've done it with mine, and is intimately aware of and integrally a part of the politics of our community. So, and Jim will introduce his guests as well, and we'll chat a little bit about where to begin to start this PAC. So, Jim? Good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Merrill, and thank you for inviting me today,
Thank you for being here.
To the show. I don't know if all of you know my history, but I'll give you a real quick history. I was born on Long Island. I went to Fordham University, where I met my lovely wife, who we've been married to 42 years. Believe it or not, we've known each other 50 years this year. Went to St. John's Law School. While attending law school, I worked as a detective investigator in the Bronx District Attorney's Office and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. Eventually took a job in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor for many years, and then got into town politics and was the attorney for a town of 200,000 people on Long Island. Eventually moved my family here in 1999, and with the idea of developing commercial industrial properties with my wife. I somehow got elected sheriff in 2000. That's a story for a book, which I'm actually thinking about writing, and was a sheriff for 4 years. I got unelected, came back in 2012, had to clean up another mess, and then was unelected in 2016. The present sheriff was my number two, who I unfortunately hired. Right now I'm a practicing attorney here in Flagler County and in Ormond Beach. We work with the Sellis Law Firm of counsel. But I have seen lots of politics in this community. I've seen it transform from a county of just under 40,000 people to now the latest number is 136,000. Correct? Is that correct? So we have certainly grown as a community. Our politics have changed dramatically. When I first came here, it was a slightly purple county. The west side had historically been Democratic, what we call Dixiecrats. Palm Coast, obviously, when it became a city, attracted a lot of Northerners, a lot of Union people. So that sort of evened out some of the registrations here. But as we've gone on, obviously, this has become a more and more Republican county. When I won in 2012, I'm probably going to be the last Democrat elected as a constitutional officer unless registration changed dramatically. But there was about a 7,000 to 8,000 difference between registrations. It's now somewhere around 30,000? 45,000.
Oh, excuse me, 25,000.
That difference, yeah.
25,000. So makes it very difficult to run as a Democrat. My wife will tell you that story. Obviously, she and I guess would tell you it's very difficult to run. Even when in Cornelia's case, she had a business background. She was a female running against an obvious candidate who was unqualified and perhaps has some, issues, which have all been revealed to us, unfortunately. So it is a difficult environment for Democrats to run. However, there are, in my opinion, and I think it's interesting that Merrill called about the PAC, there are ways for Democrats to be influential in local elections. Let me tell you that one more thing is that Palm Coast generally has a few more Democrats than the surrounding unincorporated areas and cities, right? So it's a little bit easier, but as Cornelius Ray showed, it really doesn't matter. People vote their registration, unfortunately, and it's hard to get information out unless you have buckets of money to do that. And by the way, Cornelia was endorsed by members of the REC, the head of the Trump Club. I mean, there was a lot of, cross endorsement, and it still didn't affect voters because I think we have all gone to our corners and we're not listening to each other. I think we probably all could agree on that. However, there are opportunities to influence people's opinions on issues and strive to get more middle-of-the-road candidates, in my opinion. And I think the Republican Party, and I talk to them often, are striving to do that as well. I mean, there may be some opportunities here simply because there's been so much dysfunction in the city council and disappointment about how people are operating without really taking our opinion into account. So the issue is, how do we influence local elections and perhaps even statewide elections? I think the congressional candidate that was just elected is already on the firing line, so there may be some opportunities there as well to try to influence who comes out of that primary and also the next general election. So it's going to take some, out-of-the-box thinking for us to continue to be relevant. We can sit back and just say, we're going to do it the old way and we're going to get nowhere. Or we can reach across the aisle and try to find or mentor candidates that care about us, don't care about, crazy culture issues, or say the government, is evil. When you say the government is evil, it's saying we are evil because we are government. The word politics comes from the Greek polis, means city. So politics is about us. It's not about like some other people, and that the demonizing of government is a terrible thing because it's hardworking people. I've worked in government half my life. I work with very few corrupt people. I work with hardworking people who are trying to do what you do every day, is pay their bills and send their kids to college, and they come and they care. Some of them do the job better than others, but most of them are there for the common good, right? So I think that's a conversation we can have, and I think forming a PAC where we have some influence on who the candidates are, and perhaps working with other groups, and I will introduce Greg and Kelly because they are doing exactly that, trying to find these middle-of-the-road candidates who care about us, who know the history of our community. I am startled by how little people know where we've come from. If I went down a room, I'd be interested to find out how many of you knew who the first mayor was. How many people know the name of the first mayor? Just 2 people? So he was a great man, Mayor Jim Canfield. He was former superintendent in New York City. That original group of Mayor Canfield, Jim Holland, Jerry Full, I'm going to forget all the names, were a good group. And the first city manager was Dick Kelton, who was a former county administrator from Volusia County. He set up the government for the city. So there was a lot of backbone, a lot of good people who created our city and set it on the right path, only to see us veer into Clowntown. It's embarrassing for me because I love this city. I moved my family here, to develop a new life, send all my kids to school. They all gone to do great things. My son is in the Navy. I'm very proud of them. But it's embarrassing to me. I went to a Boys and Girls Club fundraiser with people I hadn't seen in a little bit, and they all came up to me and said, what the heck? What the heck? And we should not be there. we should not be embarrassed to live in our community. We should not be embarrassed that we cannot attract city manager candidates because of our politics here. Because it affects us. It affects us where it hurts the most, in our pocketbooks. My wife concentrates on commercial industrial development. They won't come here. All the things that you want are almost impossible to bring because they read social media just like you do. And they're not going to come here and invest a bunch of money in industrial and commercial projects if they're going to have to be attacked or demonized because they want to bring tax base. And that is our essential problem. We should have a 20 to 30% commercial tax base. Is that correct, Greg, about that? Is the average. In the cities, it's like almost 40 or 50%. We're at 8 to 10%. So that means every time we have infrastructure issues like we have right now with our water and sewer or any expansion of roadways, guess who it falls on? The residential taxpayers. Most of us are retired or looking forward to retirement. This cannot continue. So I think it really behooves us to look how we can develop better candidates and support candidates who are going to protect our environment, quality of life here that we've come for, but also be able to develop commercial and industrial projects that bring us jobs and tax base. So the issue of setting up a PAC is a complicated one, and it's not inexpensive. And the reason why I've asked Greg and Kelly to come, because they've just recently set up a PAC, and they have the details of how to do that. But what Greg also was the former head of the chamber. And so he has statewide and I would say national contacts along with Kelly. And what he tried to do is do exactly what we talked about. Greg was the person that Corny and I always spoke to when we had a prospect that we thought would be attractive to the community. So he has great experience, and he has just has set up a PAC. It's completed now, Greg? Mm-hmm. I'll let him explain all of that so he can explain the process. But we've also talked about trying to mentor good candidates and get bipartisan support for them. And there are essential ingredients that we need to have. Number one, we shouldn't have to say, but sanity is kind of important.
Who would have thought we'd have to say that?
Yeah, who would have thought? Number two, we should have people who have some business background or some management background, because you're handling almost $500 million of money. You have 600 employees, $500 million of funds coming in through the community. And we need someone who has some political savvy, not ideological savvy. As I've always said, there isn't an ideological way for your plumber to do his work, or to your lawyer to do the work, or your electrician. There isn't really an ideological way to run government. I've never seen that work before. The governments that I've worked for, and I've worked for Republican governments and I've worked for Democrats, is that if you're a good manager, you're a good manager, and that organization will succeed. And probably in every aspect of your lives, wherever you have worked, you probably would agree. When you had someone at the top who can manage and deal with their personnel, hold them accountable, and make sure there was a mission that they were pointed to, it worked. When you had people that were dysfunctional at the top, the organization's dysfunctional, right? So that's what hopefully we're all agreed upon. It should be our direction. And I think, Greg and Kelly have an idea that, you may or may not embrace, but certainly if you want to influence what goes on in this community, the idea of creating a PAC is a good idea, because what we've learned from this last election, or maybe the last couple of elections, is how important social media has become in our lives. Unless we're able to influence the influences, we're not going to be able to influence anybody, right? So we have to get smarter as a group. Just because we're a minority doesn't mean we don't have an impact to be felt. And believe me, the Republicans I've spoke to are interested and reaching across the aisle and talking to us. Because if they run a candidate who is moderate, and the other side, and I will mention that in a second, the other side, and I'll tell you that other side, runs a candidate who is, a little not from the too far right, and we don't support the more moderate candidate, that person's going to get in. And so you have, in my opinion, four Republican parties that we have to deal with. I think Democrats are generally united. I've been a Democrat for a long time. I was a Republican for a short period of time. I've been an independent. But Democrats seem to be more united than they ever have because they realize if we don't move to the middle, we are going to be left out. The Republican Party really, and this has been the case since I first walked in the door, is you have the West Side Republicans who really don't really like any Northerners being here. If they could soar off the county at US 1 and float us out to sea, they'd be happy. You have what I'd call the regular Republicans, the REC Republicans. My parents were Republicans. That's what I'd call the normal Republicans who, have some conservative ideology, but are not swayed by cultural issues. They're looking for reasonable government. You then have what's the Trump Club, which follow Donald Trump and his ideals or ideas. Maybe not ideals, maybe too strong a word, but ideas. And then you have a fourth party, a fourth group of people, which the mayor represents. All who I know very well. I know Dennis McDonald. He happens to be a friend of mine. And I think that's what's important, is not to demonize people we disagree with. We have to be able to talk to people where they're at. Just because they believe in the opposite of what we believe does not mean we cannot have conversations with them. But right now, that group of people has become anti-growth. Now, I don't think any of us should be pro-uninhibited growth, but we should all be into smart growth, right? And if you demonize all development, you will not get the development that we need. So that's the fourth group that's really roiling our politics, whether it's in the county or the city, and perhaps even nationally, right? We see this nationally, this really hard right wing that doesn't seem to be, concerned about how we go forward as a country. And we're all in this together. Unless you plan on, moving to, Portugal, which seems to be the common refrain here, we need to be able to learn how to work together. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Greg and have him present what he's put together and his ideas for how we can move forward.
Sure.
Are there any questions? Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Are there any questions before?
What about speed bumps?
There'll be plenty along the way.
Right, yeah, we'll encounter them, actually.
So we really have two different conversations. By the way, my name's Greg. I'm the chairperson of Empowering Florida's Future. It's referred to, we just call it EF2. It's just easier than saying Empowering Florida's Future, but we have started a PAC, and so there's really two conversations here. One is, what are we up to with our PAC? And then the second part is, what goes into creating a PAC, right? So there's kind of, to the degree you want to have either conversation, just let me know. I think we'll cover it as quickly as we can here. In terms of Empowering Florida's Future, really what we're up to is trying to make Flagler County more business friendly. As Jim said, the amount of business that is in this community is lacking significantly, especially when you compare us to a St. John's or a Volusia. Even Putnam County, is doing pretty good. So because I have that business background, because I have that chamber experience, and I'm also a number and data guy, I'm sitting here thinking like, well, what are the metrics that matter? What do we need to do to achieve the goal of creating a more prosperous community, reducing poverty, getting people to work? We track data and all of that, and I'll just share with you very candidly, like we have 89 fewer people working in this county than we had a year ago. And that's hard to believe because literally thousands of people have moved here, the labor force has increased, but we have more people in the unemployment line, a higher unemployment rate, and fewer people actually working than we did at this point in time last year. So we're heading in the wrong direction according to the metrics. And Even before then, when I was involved at the chamber for 4 years, kind of being one of the economic development spokespeople, it was about we have to get certain things done at the government level to be ready to accept the type of jobs or industry that we expect to have here. And we're not even close. I mean, not even close. So our political committee, Empowering Florida's Future, is really about making Flagler more business friendly. We're going to do that by supporting pro-business candidates, opposing anti-business candidates, and then we can get involved in charter initiatives that appear on the ballot by educating the public. So our main goal is to build a bench of people that, as Jim said, that are sane, that we would say, wow, here's somebody with experience, that this is a person that has a common sense line of thought, that they have some sort of history in this community, that they didn't just move here, that they know what's going on. But we want to champion economic growth and innovation and continue to improve on the quality of life that has happened here. But it's going to be significantly difficult if we continue down the path we have been going down, because the national statistics are that people are moving to Florida still. And even though you hear about people trying to get out, there's 3 more people trying to get in for every 1 person trying to get out. So the population trends are not going anywhere for the next 20, 30 years. And we've done, Kelly and I have run the numbers. We know that's you could take that to the bank. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to continue to grow at a very high level. So we actually have to be aggressive as a community to figure out, how are we going to get from point A to point B? So what we're doing is we're interviewing candidates, finding people that are potentially interested in running for office, helping them understand the process that occurs when you decide to run for office, educating them on the issues. Our political committee does a significant amount of economic research, not just for Flagler County, but all 67 counties in Florida. We're going to spend a fair amount of money on polling and testing messages and understanding what works, because just because you raise money doesn't guarantee your success. You've got to have an actual plan around this. So I'll just say building a pipeline of pro-business candidates, educating those candidates. We're going to be endorsing people. Obviously, the fundraising and expenditure goes without saying for a political committee. We're going to engage voters directly and really build community support for these candidates. Before I turn it over to Kelly to kind of go through what it takes to create a PAC, I'll just tell you that we're very concerned about the direction this community is going in. The more time we waste talking about what happened at the city council meeting or the disaster this or backyard chickens or whatever it is, I mean, these are not the issues we need to be talking about, y'all. The last thing I wanted to leave you with, we need to be talking about high-level issues of where is this community going? Where does the data say we're going? What kind of a job have we already done? How can we do a better job? And when you look at the polls that the city does of the residents, it's like this is a sinking ship. They're all going in the wrong direction. The numbers, how do voters feel about their confidence in government? How do they feel like they were this time, compared to this time last year? Yeah, the consumer sentiment. We're tracking tons of data, real estate data, and all of that, but that all feeds into how are people feeling. And then so the last measure, which I think this group should particularly be concerned about, is you have over 100,000 voters in Flagler County now. 49,000 of those are Republicans, and only 24,000 of those are Democrats. And I believe it's the same as the local level, but on the statewide level, that gap's getting bigger. And I believe that gap is also getting bigger by smaller margins here in Flagler County. In other words, there's becoming fewer Democrats, more Republicans. Now you have 22,600 independent voters that are registered, almost as many as Democrats. So, I think there's got to be a real, what kind of impact can we have? For our PAC, we've done the hard work of understanding how much money has to be raised, what are the races coming up, and can we raise that amount of money with these other activities to actually be effective? The tough part is not any of that. The tough part is not raising money. It's not coming up with your vision. The tough part is how can you actually be successful at running a PAC strategically and making the dollars that we work so hard to raise actually mean something at the end of the day. For Democrats, it's very difficult in Flagler because of those numbers that I just told you about. And then when you start to add the dollars into it, it becomes pretty tough. I think we're all in a similar kind of place. We're very concerned about the directions the community's going in, and these issues that we're dealing with are not Republican and Democrat issues. Whether or not we should build a water sewer facility treatment plant so that we have clean water, that isn't political at all, right? Now, how we got to that point certainly is political, but moving forward, how do we solve these problems? It's going to be all of us getting together and talking about, what are the solutions, but having a clear-headed conversation at the leadership level with our elected officials. And that all starts with, who are the people that are actually running for office? And, more often than not, it's not people that have had a successful career or are deeply educated. It's more about, being tapped on the shoulder by the right person and saying, okay, you're going to run. And that really has to change in the community if we're to expect different results than what we've been getting since we've been here. So I'd like to turn it over to Kelly. Kelly Navarro is the Chief Operating Officer of our company. So just to give you a roundup what we do, Nexus 360 is the company that we launched after I left my tenure as Chamber President. And Nexus is about communications, PR, marketing, kind of all of those things that talk about, what is your communicating with the public, right? In addition to that, we're doing advocacy work for private sector clients, and we're we are going to be running actual campaigns, because the other side of this coin is you can raise all of this money, but if you have a candidate that doesn't know how to spend it or their plan doesn't work for this community, it's going to be a gigantic waste of money. And so that's what we're looking to change. We want reasonable, respectful, thoughtful people running for office. We feel like we have to do this in order for people to feel safe stepping up to be able to run for office, because look at the crazy situation that there is right now. So that's a lot of talk from me. I'd like to turn it over to Kelly to kind of talk about, fill in any of the holes that I missed, but also, share your thoughts on actually launching a PAC. And it sounds easy, but what are the pitfalls?
Yeah, so, we started Empowering Florida's Future, like Greg was saying, to make effective change. But running a PC is more than just filling out paperwork. So think of it as running a business. When you're establishing a business, you go to the Division of Corporations and fill out your paperwork, right? A political committee is no different, except it's governed by the Division of Elections. So you fill out the paperwork, but doing that is just just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, like your business, right? You know what it takes to run a business. You have your marketing, you have your operations, you have your infrastructure. A PAC is no different. And that's what differentiates Greg and I, PC, from other PCs that you have seen here locally in the community. We have heard and we have experienced firsthand, people give money to PCs and companies, and it goes to Tallahassee. It goes elsewhere. It is not going to Flagler County. It is not going to our candidate. There is no real operation. So when we came together, we say, how can we put this in a strategic, operational way to be successful, to one, vet the candidates, set them up for success, educate them, and then post, what do we need to do to keep them in office? What do we need to do to continuously educate them and be a support system for them? So that is how the political committee is run. So while establishing a PC is very easy as far as filling out the paperwork, you have to think, who's going to do the fundraising, who's going to do the marketing, who's going to do the operations, and then when it comes to the candidate and vetting it, you have to interview these candidates. You have to create that interview process. You have to make sure it's compliance, right? You have to figure out, okay, which candidates you're going to support or promote, and then which candidates you're going to educate and send to school, right? And this is a whole process. You want to make them successful so they know how to run an effective campaign. And then, so that's the PC. On the other side of Nexus, we're here to say, hey, if you need campaign management, we will help you with your campaign management to be very successful. And that's something, I mean, Jim can attest to with Cornelia, that there was a lacking of a marketing and effective strategy there on some stances. So I think, following through all those things, so operationally, and then you have to think of all the risk and all the audits. The PCs are heavily regulated. You have to report every quarter. Come election year, you're reporting every 30 days. You have to audit your books. You have to make sure the messaging that you're sending, you have to make sure it's legal. Like, I'm a corporate attorney, but I don't know anything about electioneering laws and what to say and not to say. So I need to hire an electioneering attorney to say, hey, can I post this? Can I message this? Can I do these things? So it's no different than a business. You're running a business. So think of all the aspects of the infrastructure that goes into business. It's exactly of running a PC in order to be effective. There's one thing to collect money and give to candidates, which we know is not successful, versus collecting money, having an operation that you control, that is vetted, where you can make that candidate successful, right? Build your bench and also support them during after they're elected to post-election, right? And continuing to build that bench. So I think that's, really it. I mean, there's a conception. So things you have to think about is the legal and risk management things, right? From a business perspective, same thing with PC. The electioneering law and advocacy, what you could say, what you can say, what you can do, what you can't do, and by posting things, sending out stuff, ads. The compliance, the treasury, the reporting thing is a huge thing. That has to happen, like I said, quarterly and then monthly, and then it gets audited all the time. And you don't want to mess with that part because the IRS will take away your status. And the Division of Elections will shut down your PC in a heartbeat. And we know in Florida they're getting more and more in that because what they've seen with a lot of PCs, it works almost like a shell company. You put in money, one PC transferred to the other, and kickback happens along the way. So, and that's a real thing. And then, the fundraising and donor, and constantly having someone to go out there and market, go out there and recruit, not just for candidates, but for funding, for money, and all those things, and having those relationships. And then, on top of that, we spend hours every week watching City Council, Flagler County Council, and those meetings are not 1-2 hour. And sometimes I feel like I'm watching a telenovela, to be honest, I'm like, is this government? So keeping those things and making sure we have the narrative of what's going on and our pulse check on things, and also things, so let's say if we have to advocate against a candidate, we're taking stuff right out of the dais that is coming out from thing, and we have our whole intellectual property. We're keeping all that stuff, so when it's time to attack or support another candidate, we're going to go factual. We're not going to be disrespectful, but we're going to do it in a factual way. You said this on the dais, blah blah blah. That sort of thing. So I think the fact of running a committee, you have to look at it as running a business and what it entails. So fundraising is a key, but the operational aspect to it, to be successful, to set up something that's successful takes a lot of work, a lot of energy. But if you want to make effective change and bring something to the table and keep our money here in Flagler County, and our oath to starting Empowering Florida's Future is to keep every penny in Flagler County. It does not go anywhere else. It goes to Flagler County, it goes to the candidates here in Flagler County. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, any questions that anyone has? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. This was very enlightening, both, you just described me. You raise some money and give it to a candidate. That's what I thought it was. And it's obviously a little bit more complicated than that. And the other thing that I would want to say on a baseline to all of us is, I think it's one thing to go out and raise some money and try and support pro-business candidates. I think it's another thing to go out and try and raise money for Democrats. And if you do raise money for Democrats, maybe, so what? So the whole thing gives me pause. I was pumped about the whole thing before this, and now I'm having a lot of second thoughts. Somebody talked me out of this because I'm saying, suppose we did raise a decent amount of money and we were able to support a Democratic candidate. Are we going to get a Democratic candidate elected?
I want to support them. After hearing all this, let's put our efforts towards them. But are you supporting all candidates, or Democrats and independents, or only what are you doing?
Yeah, so right now we haven't supported any candidates, but we're very open to supporting the right candidates moving forward. For us, it's less less about the party politics and more about what does this community actually need. Kelly and I both live here. I have a 5-year-old going to BTES up the street and a 13-year-old going to ITMS right next door. We own property here, we live here, so this isn't about Republican or Democrat as much as it is about where the hell is this community going and the dangers. I'm just telling y'all, I mean, from where I'm sitting, like the city could be in real trouble very soon, not because of what Mike Norris is doing, but because they've taken their eye off the ball. As soon as this budget passes in Tallahassee, that's going to clarify what the budget situation is in Flagler and for Palm Coast. And then we're all going to be sitting here thinking about how a 30% water sewer increase on our rates was absolutely nothing compared to the property tax increase coming. So,
Vision statement.
yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah, we do, we could send that, but it's really to advocate and support pro-business candidates and get them into office.
Yeah, because I would like to see the vision
I'll share it
statement.
with everyone. Let's go to Kathy and then to Mark, but I have to read Vicky's mind for a minute. You talked about businesses.
Yes.
Belvedere terminals, good for our community, not good for our community.
No, I thought Belvedere Terminals did a very poor job of rolling out. I tried to communicate with that CEO before it got too far down the pipeline. I think something like that, if you're going to put, first of all, it goes back to Florida, right? What do we all know about Florida? Well, our quality of life is intrinsically linked to the environment, right? And I'm a Republican saying that, so I don't think. Are the fuel terminals the issue? Probably not. The location is definitely the issue. We went out and drove that road where they were going to build, you know.
They're still trying to get it here. You know that,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's dead personally.
Okay.
But so for me, it's not all business, but we
Okay.
do need to start looking outside the box of other types of businesses. But I don't think that was the right.
They're
location.
rezoning for
Okay,
hazardous
thank you.
waste right now,
We
in
have-
there now.
Yeah, we have Kathy and then Mark.
I felt like I was participating in an episode of Shark Tank, and I'm Barbara saying, and for those reasons, I'm out.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you this though. So I mentioned numbers, and I won't get into because we've run the numbers 6-way to Sunday. I mean, you have to look at what dollar amount can make you successful, right? And that number is fairly high. So, and then you have the political reality of Republicans versus Democrats. So, you know, to us, it's, you know, the numbers are speaking pretty clear. I think you would have to raise a sizable amount of money, but the key to that is you're limited on how much you can actually give a candidate. You can only give a candidate $1,000 per cycle.
Yeah.
So if you find a candidate that you really like, your PAC could only physically, you know, support them with $2,000 total if they make it past the primary. And then beyond that, all the other money is what's left for you to do your messaging, but you can't. Yeah, the PAC to do the messaging, but you can't coordinate with that candidate. So then how do you know the messaging that you're going to do is actually going to be effective in the marketplace if you never study what the marketplace feels about the messaging, right? So, I mean, it gets quite expensive. I mean, the budget that we have for what we're doing is, you know, north of $250,000 to be involved in the next 2026 election cycle. But it's needed. When you start to break down, you got to pay attorneys every time, you know, to make sure you're not going to get sued or written up by the IRS or fined by the, you know, Division of Ethics. I mean,
So what percentage
serious.
of the money do you think goes to administration?
For us, it's kind of different, but in our world, it's about a third, maybe a little less. But, you know, if you want to have a professional group of people running your stuff, filing your campaign reports, making sure you're doing everything legally, and I'll tell you another story.
Do you do that? Do you manage other PACs?
Yeah, we do
Yes.
manage other PACs. But you know, you also have to be careful and make the right decisions when it's just y'all in a room, right? Not just when the IRS is watching, because we've had people approach us wanting to give us money for the PC in a way that is illegal. That's up to you to know. That's not up to them to know, right? So you can't just think like, oh, I'm going to take all comers with all the money, because if they start getting like, well, I don't want my name to appear on a report and I want to give it to this person to give to you, something like that happens, I mean, you all might forget about fines. You really might go to jail.
Jail.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we really got to.
Jail? No.
Yeah,
It
there's-
doesn't exist anymore.
Well, not if you're a Republican.
They're not, that's you,
Again, we can apply for pardons. Mark was next. We can-
I want to address something you said. Last year, I was a Democrat running for city council, and I only missed by 2 votes, and I only spent $1,500. If I had had a couple of $1,000s more, I could have had some mail-outs, I might have went over the limit. It can be done. You know, you just have to go out and give the right message. I gave a good message. I got a lot of Republican votes, along with Democrat votes, but I was too shy, you know?
Yeah.
It can happen. It can happen.
Mark and then Donna.
So many questions. First of all, thank you for coming and presenting what possibly the end of the road of what we're trying to decide if we want to get in a car. You guys you're 100 miles down the highway. As
We
far
want to
as-
be transparent, you know, like,
Well,
that's
no,
going.
I appreciate that. And obviously, a Democratic group or liberal group here in Palm Coast is a struggle to begin with. And none of us can pretend to know the challenges in front of us, whether it's Mark and his election or others, or being able to win with a Band-Aid. And I observed PAC supporting our Republican candidates. They weren't giving the Republican candidate any money, but they were doing their own mailers, they were doing their own flyers, they were doing their own messaging, which you're completely free to do if you have the money, which saves them from doing that. But a couple of questions. So you guys have not faced an election cycle yet. You've started after the general?
Yeah, we started after Cornelia because we saw the need for it. We really did. And we've done it before.
Yep.
Greg did in Tallahassee and stuff like that. I worked for the state of Delaware. So, we've done it before and we realized this is much needed in here.
Good.
Yeah.
As we,
Yeah.
those of us have been
Yeah, okay.
talking about a PAC for,
If I can just interrupt, because I have to
Yeah.
unfortunately
Yeah,
run
yeah.
to it. So, again, I think you have some choices here, if I can just sum up and can continue, is you can try to create your own PAC, and I think you probably, if you wanted to engage Kelly and Greg, they may consider helping you do that. Or you can engage with them directly. And so I think those are two real choices. I agree with Mark. There is a way for us to be influential. And I think, it's like anything else. If you you play with your own chips, that's all you got. Play with a bunch of chips, you have more influence. And I think maybe a continued conversation with Greg and Kelly is in your best interest. Because I have to tell you, if Cornelia had them, or Mark had them, they may have had more successful campaigns. Because the worst thing as a candidate, right, Mark, is that once you say you're in, your life changes. You're no longer a person, you're a candidate. And you need people who are supporting you, who know the messaging, who have the statistics, because once you become a candidate, it's like being in a fun house. Everything is distorted. So I think it's something, either of those things that you're considering are good options. But I think the ultimate thing is, how do we maximize our effectiveness and do not, be overwhelmed by our minority status? We can be influential. And Mark's campaign, I think, shows that. We got a Democrat elected to the school board, actually two. So there is possibilities there. But I think just running as a Democrat without some substantial, backing is just a fool's errand at this point. But supporting, reasonable candidates may be the way to go. I'm sorry I have to go, but I'm happy to continue this conversation.
Thank
Thank
You're very
you,
welcome.
thank you. We'll have you back, yes, thank
See you
you.
guys later.
Okay, yeah, Donna was next, and we have some time limitations in general, so Donna, then Joe.
Okay, you were talking about $1,000 limit for donations
Direct
for
send.
candidates. Why does Citizen United not, that's a massive group of people.
Well, that could be different because it's a federal political committee.
This is state,
Yeah, we run a state one. You can also run a local one.
Okay.
But there is a future for us where we may want to support candidates running for state house or senate. We can't get involved in federal races. So that's one of the first decisions you make. But that to answer your question, for all these different levels of PAC, there's different rules for each of them. So on the federal level,
Anything goes.
right.
And the power of the PAC, especially in the state of Florida, is not so much the direct spend, which is the money giving directly to candidate, The power of the PAC is the communication and marketing from the indirect spend. That's the money where you have unlimited control to message, once you've endorsed a candidate, let's say, like, we have a whole process. We interview people, we vet them, we figure out, to me, it's sort of, do you choose any C-suite to be at your CEO roundtable? The answer is no. You vet them pretty darn good before you bring them into an organization. So that's sort of how we sort of look at it, so it's a process. But the power of the PAC comes once that candidate is vetted, once we've said, hey, this is a candidate we're going to represent, that's where the voice and the power of the money gets spent through the messaging, the marketing, and really, mailers and stuff are great, but in today's world, it's the digital. Your community is digital, right? Your community is communicating digitally, and that's where you have to do the communication and the messaging mostly.
In our case, when Mark was running, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We did spend a lot of time making videos in our dining room to put out on Facebook for all over the Palm
And
Coast area.
what's happening in Palm Coast,
Yeah.
and did these little 2-minute videos.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think it helped.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
We are up against a time
Sorry.
limitation as
Thanks.
well. And you're welcome to come back next week, by the way, as is, I mentioned to Jim.
Also.
But let's go to Joe, and then Donna, I think, was Joe and Donna, and then we'll wind things up.
I just want to say thank you. I'm with Al.
You're out, okay.
But
Yeah.
if I had 2 minutes, you work for the state of Delaware? It's my understanding the state of Delaware bought a golf course to keep it green space, and it's managed by Troon. And I'm trying to figure out how to get to the city of Palm Coast to do the same thing. All right? To me, it's kind of the difference between a blue state and a red state.
Yeah, yeah.
All right? Delaware said, we want to keep this green space.
Yeah.
We'll buy the golf course. It's the old Levere's golf course, which is now Deerfield.
Yep.
It's run by an outside company. Is that something a PAC could do to influence the council maybe on looking at different ways for the city to keep the golf course, as opposed to selling it to
Yeah.
somebody who may shut it down?
So a PAC is for candidates or issues that's going to be on the ballot.
It's an issue.
That's
The
a
golf
ballot.
course is an
That's
issue.
a ballot. But that's where the advocacy part comes in. You know what I mean? So that's where, like, if you have an issue that you want to advocate, that's where our advocacy comes in. The political, unless the issue is going to be on the ballot, right? That's when you can advocate pro or against, depending the stance.
Oh, it has to be on the
you know,
ballot.
Yeah, so our company can advocate, Nexus 360 can advocate for that, what you're talking about. The PC cannot unless it's going to be on the ballot.
Yeah.
That
So like the
doesn't-
charter referendum that's
Okay,
coming up,
right, okay,
right?
okay,
That's gonna
okay,
be on the
right,
ballot.
right.
Depending on the position of everything,
Right,
we can
okay,
go
so it has
for,
to be on the
pro, or
ballot.
against, right? But let's say, a business wants the golf course, like say they wanna hire us to say, hey, can you look at this? Can you really advocate, go up to city council, manage these things? We do those things too. So,
Not the PAC.
but it's not PAC related,
Your
correct?
other
Yeah,
business.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because with the PAC, you could only do so much, you're only allowed to do
Okay,
X.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Donna, by the way, is the president of the Palm Coast Democratic Club, and after that, we'll wind up. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I just have a question, more like clarification. So you said that you are limited as a PAC, EF2, that you could only donate $1,000 directly to a candidate per election cycle, correct? And then the rest of it, the marketing, the outreach, whether it's mail or video or any of that, that's unlimited, but
Yes.
reported. It needs to be
Yes.
reported, but it is unlimited.
Unlimited, correct.
Thank you, that was.
And that's where the power of the PAC comes in.
Yeah, so I would take I would accept the opinion over here off to my right, but I would remind you again that in Mark's case, if we had $1,000 to give to Mark, it would have made a world of difference. If we were able to send out mailers like the opponents of Courtney Vanderbunt, for those of you who are familiar with her election, I think we would have made a difference, and we're talking about a lot less than $250,000. So it's something for us to think about, and we'll get together next week Where exactly, I'll let you know. But we'll get together next week and continue this discussion. Invite the two of you back, and I invited Jim Manfred back for next week as well. Thank you for being here, and to be continued. We have lots of work to do.